All right, guys, welcome to the show. So, of course, I have updates on Israel for you. They raided a hospital. We'll talk about that. We have the U.S. reacting. We have some new future plans for Gaza that have been revealed. We're also apparently nearing some sort of a hostage deal, which is some good news. We have a pro-Israel protest to talk about. This was big news. There was, a lot of people went to D.C. to show their support for what Israel is currently doing. We have Ben Shapiro versus Candace Owens. We have a fight, or nearly a fight, a brawl in the U.S. Senate. And of course, we'll get to Vivek Ramaswamy versus Chris Cuomo over on News Nation, or as I call it, the graveyard of cable news. They have people like Chris Cuomo and Bill O'Reilly. They're like running the show there. So anyway, we'll get to that in just a little bit. Everybody do me a big favor. Please click subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. It helps massively in the algorithm, and it doesn't cost you anything. And we're trying to continue to grow the community here. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. So we got news last night that the Al-Shifa hospital or medical complex in Gaza City is being raided by the IDF. So I've seen a lot of reports. There's some contradictory information. There's a lot of things that are out there that are rumors that I want to be able to share with you, but I can't verify it yet. So it's hard for me to come out here and give you everything that I've seen because I don't know what percentage of it is misinformation, etc. But I will give you what we do know about the situation. So according to Euromed Monitor, they're, of course, a human rights organization, they say the Israeli forces stormed in large numbers the Al-Shifa medical complex in Gaza City earlier this morning, turning it into military barracks and a detention center where patients, displaced persons, and healthcare professionals are subject to different forms of abuse. The Israeli forces stormed in large numbers the Al-Shifa medical complex. Does this say the same thing? Earlier this morning, that's the same tweet. I don't know why they double tweeted it. We are concerned the Israeli forces are committing executions inside the Shifa hospital in Gaza as our team has documented sporadic gunfire there. According to eyewitnesses, the Al-Shifa complex did not witness any gunfire other than from the Israeli forces. The Israeli allegations about the use of Al-Shifa medical complex in Gaza for military purposes do not require extended hours of searching and raiding. Therefore, there are concerns that the army might be creating the scene that might be released later. So, in other words, what's going on is they surround the Al-Shifa medical complex. They enter. Now, remember, this is a place where hundreds or potentially even thousands, depending on which report you believe, of people are kind of hiding from the barbarity and the slaughter that's going on outside the complex. But apparently there's nowhere safe in Gaza because they're not safe in there. And so they shoot their way in. There's some reports that I can't verify that, as they were moving in towards the complex, they were sort of indiscriminately firing at certain people. Of course, the other day, there were the stories about people waving white flags were shot. I believe that was in a different hospital, and it was a few days ago. But like similar reports on the ground in this instance, they get in there. There's actually no counterfire from Hamas, at least according to the early reports. And the speculation is, well, like, what are they doing in there? What are they doing? This is not really a Hamas stronghold in the way that they declare it is, and they take over the hospital. It's important to remember, guys, that a lot of the news and information that we've gotten about the conflict is coming out of Al-Shifa Hospital. There's a lot of journalists and reporters who are there and people from human rights groups that have been tracking the conflict from the very beginning. So then that also leads to the question, is it now going to be really difficult to get good information coming out of there because of this move? Well, this is a piece of information that I should definitely share with you here. So this is reported in Tablet Magazine. Breaking, just preparing you guys for the propaganda that will be published tomorrow. This would be today. The IDF built a basement and bunker under Al-Shifa Hospital in 1983. That's how they know it is there. The Israelis will use this as an excuse to commit their war crimes in the hospital. Please understand that there's a difference between basement and a bunker and tunnel. Okay, so they're citing this passage in this Tablet magazine article that says, in passing by Western reporters, but because they built it back in 1983 when Israel still ruled Gaza, they built a secure underground operating room and tunnel network beneath Shifa Hospital, which is one among several reasons why Israeli security sources are so sure there is a main Hamas command bunker in or around al-Shifa. So in other words, back when Israel was fully occupying Gaza, not just doing like the blockade occupation, fully occupying Gaza, in 1983, they built basically a bunker and a command center underneath. So that's why they're so sure, hey, we're going to find stuff in there. Now, look, here's the thing. Do I think, because of course they make human shields is the argument coming from the IDF. Is that true to one extent or another? That, Hamas is sort of mixed in with the civilian population? Well, look, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I think that's obviously true. You have Gaza is very small, and it would be the dumbest strategy of all time if Hamas decided we're going to set up a Hamas command center and just put up our Hamas flag and say, here we are, Israel, come bomb us. So I do think they mix in with the civilian population. That's not really the point of contention, at least in my opinion. So I think they will find some stuff there. I think they will find some maybe weapons that belong to Hamas or some ammunitions or whatever. And, some people might disagree with that, but I think they're being kind of silly if they object and they say, no, I don't think they're going to find anything at all. Now, will they still maybe dress it up and maybe make it worse than it is? That's certainly possible that the IDF would do that. They have a track record, certainly, throughout this conflict of lying over and over. But, the question is, what do you do if they are mixed in with the civilian population? And on that one, I don't think it's a difficult question. If you have to take out 20 innocent people to get 5 Hamas members, I think it's crazy to pull the trigger in that situation. I always give you guys, flip the situation to a domestic scenario to figure out how you feel about it. If you have some psycho takes over a school and is holding a gun to the head of a toddler, are you going to send in the local police department drone to bomb the entire school and kill 70 innocent people to get the one bad guy who's holding a hostage? No, you wouldn't do that. So in other words, even if there are quote-unquote human shields, that's not something that you then go, okay, I'll throw my arms up and I got to attack everybody in sight. I think people need to object on the right grounds here. The objection of no, I don't think Hamas is mixed in with civilians. I don't think that's a correct objection because I think it's untrue, number one. Number two, the point is, even if they are mixed in with civilians, you can't shoot and kill. You can't kill. We're seeing 74% to 94% innocent civilian deaths. That is because they are making a decision. We do not care. We will also kill civilians, and we're fine with it. All right, so also, I got to give you guys the most recent update that we have on the numbers. Again, it's getting harder to continue with the count because the human rights groups on the ground and the people who are doing the work, they're also in danger. And, I'm sure that the medical experts on the ground, their capacity is kind of collapsing as we speak. So how are they going to get totally accurate numbers? I don't know. Now, according to the UN, we're at about 11,000 or 12,000 deaths. That's what they can verify. Med Monitor, who's also on the ground there, they say that we're at 14,710 deaths, 6,220 children. So now we've crossed the 6,000 mark for kids dead, 3,412 women. Of the 14,710 deaths in total, 13,421 are innocent civilians, according to Med Monitor. So again, we're above 90% when we look at this here. Injuries now, they have about 32,000. The number of journalists killed has ticked up again to 49 total. It was 46 a couple weeks ago, and it's ticked up slowly but surely since then. We have about 1.65 million people who are displaced, 55,200 completely destroyed units, so buildings in Gaza. 160,700 partially destroyed units. We have 117 damaged press headquarters, 221 damaged schools, 821 destroyed factories, 68 damaged mosques. That one has also ticked up. 3 damaged churches. We discussed the Orthodox church bombing about 2 or 3 weeks ago now. 408 health staff have been targeted, including 198 doctors, nurses, and paramedics who have been killed. And then you have 115 health facilities in total that have been bombed, including 21 hospitals that have been targeted, 41 ambulances, 51 clinics. So this is what's going on. It is absolutely devastating. Now, in the midst of all of this, everything I just laid out for you, they're raiding a hospital, civilians are being killed indiscriminately. We also get this news from Bloomberg. The U.S. has quietly ramped up military aid to Israel. delivering on requests that include more laser-guided missiles and ammunition. So the full list is actually way longer than this. There's all sorts of weaponry and ammunition that is being sent to Israel now, and we're trying to do it quietly. Why? Because they know, they feel the pressure in Washington about how the population is not okay with this. 66% want a ceasefire. We have all these pro-Palestine protests all over the place. So they're feeling the pressure, and they're trying to hide this and keep it on the down low. But of course, it leaked. Now, the other thing is, remember, we had some people in the State Department resign because they said the process to give weapons and ammunition to Israel is comical. Like, for anybody else who we sell weapons to or give weapons to, it's a detailed process where every single bullet is logged and we know exactly where everything is going. And in the case of Israel, they say, don't worry about tracking it in any specific way, shut up and send it. And you had some people who resigned because they said, okay, number one, we're not doing this the right way. Number two, on moral grounds, I'm going to object because we see how this weaponry is being used. But that did not stop Joe Biden. That does not stop the U.S. government from continuing to arm and back Israel. Look at this from Human Rights Watch. The Israeli military's repeated, apparently unlawful attacks on medical facilities, personnel, and transport are further destroying Gaza's healthcare system and should be investigated as war crimes. So here you have Human Rights Watch. It's like a Western group, which, if anything, is biased in a pro-West direction. They're coming out and saying, look, the evidence is overwhelming. We need to investigate Israel for war crimes because they're attacking so many different medical facilities. People brought back up on Twitter an old tweet from Hillary Clinton from, I think it was 2022, where she said something along the lines of, if Russia doesn't want to be accused of war crimes, then they should stop bombing hospitals. And people have brought that back up, and they're like, based, absolutely true, but cross out Russia now and put Israel, because the same rules of war, laws of war, should apply. Here we have a story of a specific bombing of a UN compound, which really, what this does for everybody is it sort of rips the mask off of what's going on, so you see it nakedly for what it is, because of the facts around this particular case. A UN compound was directly hit by 3 Israeli strikes. There are no other buildings next to the compound. The status of the compound was formally communicated to Israel. This is not collateral damage. This is not the fog of war. This is complete indifference to anything resembling proportion or precision. So in other words, the point here is they bombed a UN compound in coastal southern Gaza on purpose. It wasn't a whoopsie. It wasn't an accident. Of course, my guess is they're pretty pissed off that the UN has been very vocal in telling Israel, stop with the war crimes, stop killing civilians, you're going way too far here, we want to condemn you. And now Israel has a grudge to pick with the UN, and so they go as far as to bomb a UN compound on purpose. This is what we're dealing with here. So this is a very, very important part of the story that really shows you what their future plans are for Gaza. Netanyahu's rejection of the PA, the Palestinian Authority, returning to Gaza, is kneecapping U.S. efforts to rally like-minded Arab countries around a strategy for stabilizing the coastal enclave after the war, an administration official and 2 senior Arab diplomats told the Times of Israel. So, in other words, the U.S. has been looking at what's going on, and they say, Israel, we love you, we sympathize with you, we understand you want to get rid of Hamas because of their terrible terror attack against you. Here's what you should do. Get rid of Hamas, and of course the U.S. is backing them almost no matter what they do in their war against Hamas because they're killing massive numbers of civilians. But the U.S. says, hey, we should probably make it so that the Palestinian Authority, who's in control of the West Bank, they are not Hamas, they are viewed as way more moderate. The Palestinian Authority should govern Gaza after this, right? And Israel goes, no, we're not accepting that by any stretch of the imagination. So if it's not going to be Hamas, and it's not going to be the Palestinian Authority, and you're not going to have elections for some new sort of group, if it's not going to be international control, what's it going to be? We all know the answer. They've already announced we're basically annexing North Gaza, and then what they're trying to do now is work out a deal so that they can get South Gaza too. I'll give you some more information on that in just a little bit here. So CNN, early on in this conflict, I think Jake Tapper did a decent job showing concern for civilians on the Palestinian side and holding people to task if they had no concerns about civilians on the Palestinian side. But now they've sort of changed their tune. So here we have a story coming out of CNN. Hamas has command node under Al-Shifa Hospital, U.S. official says. And then you go on here. CIA declined to comment. CNN has not seen the intelligence cited by the U.S. official. So now you're seeing many instances of like CNN just taking the IDF's word for stuff, or CNN taking U.S. government officials' word on stuff, and it's big and bold claims, and they don't even see the evidence, and they run with it. There was another, I think it was Caitlin Collins, did a segment where it was basically a ride-along with the IDF. And apparently the IDF had to pre-screen and pre-clear the segment to say, it's okay, you can run this. So basically what we're talking about here is rank propaganda coming out on the side of the IDF. Again, more on that later because we have some moves behind the scenes which could help explain why they're leaning in this direction so strongly. Now, again, let me be clear. Is Hamas mixed in with the civilian population? Of course they're mixed in with the civilian population. Absolutely. That's not the point. That doesn't give you license to go kill 90% civilians at a hospital or an apartment building or a marketplace or a mosque, etc. So anyway, here we go. More. This is, now I'm going to give you the future plans they have for Gaza. Israeli minister calls for voluntary emigration of Gazans. Voluntary emigration. Israeli minister says Israel no longer able to accept existence of Gaza, no longer able to accept the existence, calls for voluntary emigration. A senior member of Benjamin Netanyahu's government said on Tuesday, Gaza could not survive as an independent entity, and Palestinians there should agree to voluntarily emigrate and leave for other countries. The finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, said, I welcome the initiative of the voluntary emigration of Gaza Arabs to countries around the world. This is the right humanitarian solution for the residents of Gaza and the entire region after 75 years of refugees, poverty, and danger. The state of Israel will no longer be able to accept the existence of an independent entity in Gaza. So first of all, let's state the obvious. What the fuck does you accepting it have to do with anything? It shouldn't be up to you. In fact, since it's up to you, that's the problem. Like, this is the crux and the core of the problem, is that you think it's up to you to say, I no longer accept your existence living in the place you've lived for a very long time. I mean, that's absurd. But look, the main point is here, they call it a humanitarian solution. No, this is like putting lipstick on the pig of what is brazen and overt ethnic cleansing. We cannot accept you, so now we're going to have to just kick you out. And you can voluntarily go to any of a number of countries. And that makes us the good guys. That makes us humanitarian. Because I didn't kill all of you. I let some of you get kicked out to places you don't want to go. Man, so look, this is what they're settling on. Now, what they've been trying to do is bribe Sisi, who's the head of Egypt. And they literally said, we'll wipe out all of your debt with the IMF. So they're trying to bribe him to allow Gazans into the Sinai Desert where they'd set up tent cities. And this would then allow Israel to just take all of Gaza. And we would be looking at the end of Gaza. Now, Sisi doesn't want to be viewed as helping with an ethnic cleansing, so he sort of resisted. And it looks like he's stood strong on that. And so now Israel's talking about, well, what if we make deals with countries all around the world to just accept these Palestinians for a humanitarian solution? I've never seen, like, the fact that this isn't called what it is in plain, straightforward terms by every news organization drives me absolutely crazy. Like, obviously this isn't ethnic cleansing. Obviously that's what this is. So, in the wake of Israel cracking down on Al-Shifa Hospital and bombing and then doing the raid, of course, there was that story that went viral. You had these babies who had to be taken out of incubators. These are premature babies. They need the incubators, but they had to be taken out because the hospital has no food, fuel, water, power, etc. And it's been that way for 4 days. And so this was a big story that blew up online, and it really, exposes Israel for what it's doing. Well, they decided we need to, get ahead of this narrative, or we need to try to combat this narrative. So the IDF releases this. The IDF is in the process of coordinating the transfer of incubators from a hospital in Israel to Gaza. So they're trying to put a fig leaf and say, oh, no, us, bro, we're being humanitarian. I don't know what you're talking about. This is fake news. Watch, look, see, we're the good guys. Okay, well, what's the problem here? The problem is they have incubators. It's not that they need incubators. They already have them. The problem is there's no power because they ran out of fuel. And then, so what did Israel do on the fuel front? We tried to give them fuel, but then they were blocked by Hamas from taking the fuel, so it's all on Hamas. Okay, if you read the specifics of that story, they tried to give them 300 liters of fuel, 300. What it takes to run that hospital is between 6,000 and 10,000 liters per day. And they left the 300 liters about a half a mile from the hospital in a war zone. And then when nobody came and took it, they were like, see, Hamas. So it's like they're not even really trying, man. It's sort of offensive. Clearly what this propaganda is meant to be for is like a normie audience who's barely paying attention, who might come across this, not think any deeper about it, and say, oh, see, Israel's trying their best. Here we have Kenneth Roth, the former executive director of Human Rights Watch. He comes out and says, the Israeli army said it had targeted a suspicious vehicle containing several terrorists. This is in Lebanon. The only people in the car were 3 girls, ages 14, 12, and 10, their grandmother and their mother. All were killed except the mother. See, this is what's going on, man. This is what's happening. And the numbers are astonishing. Even if you believe the best case scenario for Israel, it's 74% innocent civilians, according to the UN. Again, the worst number is about 94-ish% from Euromed Monitor. Absolutely unacceptable, especially when you look at the context that with Hamas's brutal terror attack, they killed 45% innocent civilians. Unacceptable, horrible, terrorist, but also as a raw number and a percentage way better than what Israel is managing to do. And of course, this is going to draw Lebanon deeper into the war. So now we have some more pushback in the U.S. 400 plus political appointees and staff members representing around 40 U.S. government agencies write Biden in protest of his support for Israel's war in Gaza. Perhaps most significant example yet of internal dissent within the U.S. government over Biden's Israel policy. So this isn't the story from the other day of the State Department, where internally they're like, whoa, we don't like this. And then, we covered that the other day. It was great that they came out and said that. Now this isn't just the State Department. 400 plus political appointees and staff members representing around 40 U.S. government agencies. And this is reported in Haaretz. Silver lining for sure. You're seeing some real pushback. All right, here we have, God, this is so heartbreaking. So children in Gaza were rejoicing because it rained. And the fact that it rained meant that a lot of these people could finally get a drink. Because remember, when they cut off food, fuel, and water to over 2 million people, what tends to happen in those scenarios is people go starving or people go thirsty. And so we forget about that in the midst of all the bombing, and we're talking about all the bombing and the damage and the outright killing. But there's also like slow death going on. So this is a video of a kid gathering some water. He's basically like overjoyed and saying, God is saving us effectively. So anyway, back to the media. So CNN has really changed their tune quite a bit. Jake Tapper has also been doing interviews in the midst of like thousands and thousands of Palestinian children being slaughtered and, being lost under rubble permanently, dying a slow, painful death. In the midst of all that, Jake Tapper recently had on some Jewish girl from a college campus where she whined about feeling unsafe, even though nothing happened. Like, this is where their focus is. They're focused more on fifis. It's almost like the reverse of the classic stereotype of the college lefty, who's like oversensitive and wants to censor everything and calls everything racist, sexist, and bigoted, and they have a septum ring and pink hair or whatever. This is the stereotype of like the snowflake lefty. Now you have the snowflake right-wingers or hardcore Israel supporters, and they're talking, I'm feeling so unsafe with these pro-Palestine groups. So a lot of these groups are being banned. Well, Jake Tapper and other CNN hosts are having these people on to just talk shit about Palestinian groups and act like they're evil and wrong and bad and they're dangerous and all that stuff. Again, this is as Gaza is being wiped off the map. So maybe this is one of the reasons why. Billionaires discuss $50 million anti-Hamas media blitz. The Wall Street and Hollywood billionaires have discussed in recent weeks a plan to spend as much as $50 million on a media campaign to define Hamas, the American people, as a terrorist organization. Real estate billionaire Barry Sternlicht launched the campaign in the days after the October 7th attack in Israel, and an email viewed by Semaphore saw $1 million donations each from dozens of the business world's wealthiest people. He wrote that he'd had a great conversation about the effort with CNN owner David Zaslav, and the Endeavor CEO and talent agent Ari Emanuel had agreed to coordinate the campaign. Those spokespeople for both men said they aren't involved now. The campaign would aim to distinguish between anti-Semites and the Palestinian situation, he wrote, as U.S. and global media increasingly focus coverage on the deaths in Gaza, potentially eroding sympathy and support for Israel. Quote, public opinion will surely shift as scenes, real or fabricated by Hamas, of civilian Palestinian suffering will surely erode Israel's current empathy in the world community. We must get ahead of the narrative. Jesus Christ, that is absolutely terrifying. So in the early days, they were like, look, when Israel responds and they kill all these civilians, people are going to be very critical of Israel. We need to get ahead of that, and we need to paint our narrative, which is Palestinians bad guys, Israelis good guys, and don't think any deeper than that. Don't think any deeper than that. So when you have colossal amounts of money pouring in to try to craft the narrative in mainstream media, and then you see a very clear shift in tone, that's something to be concerned about. Now, look, I don't think the deal went through yet, so maybe it's just CNN hosts are being organically more shitty on the issue. But at a time when they should ramp it up in favor of a ceasefire, and they should do solid, objective coverage about the disaster that is the slaughter from Israel of Palestinians, instead, they've really changed their tune, and they're doing ride-alongs with the IDF and spewing their propaganda and talking about anti-Semitism on college campuses. It's astonishing. I should be thankful that there's this lane wide open for anybody to come along and do like reasonably good and objective coverage on the issue, because then it will create a lot of eyeballs looking at content like mine. But I'd much rather have a good media across the board so people are educated on this, so more people could take action to stop it. All right. Then we have this. This woman is like literally the worst spokesperson Israel could ever ask for. Worst ever. Krishnan Guru Murthy asked Israel's ambassador to the UK, Tzippi Hotavoli, whether she has empathy for the Palestinian people, and here is what she says.
I'm asking you, do you have any empathy with the Palestinian position?
I have zero empathy to people that time after time refuse to recognize the right of the Jewish state to their homeland, the Jewish people in their homeland. I have zero sympathy because I want to live in a world where we can live together.
How can you live together
but they deny my right to exist?
If you have zero empathy, in your own words, with those people?
No, it's not what I said. I said I have zero sympathy to the fact that they lost their land. They didn't lose their land. They committed the crime of attacking the small state of Israel after the UN decision.
So do you have any empathy with the Palestinian people?
Absolutely. I think that.
What is your empathy?
I think my empathy to the Palestinian people, that we could have had a flourishing region, having the best high tech, the best life.
That's an argument.
No,
I'm asking you to share their pain for a moment.
So I'll just give you an example, okay? The best flourishing economic areas are in Judea and Samaria, where you have factories that have Palestinians and Israelis working together. That could have been the vision everywhere. But when you refuse to recognize the right of a Jew to exist, this is where it fails. So I think this ideology that doesn't want Jews to exist, this is a tragedy. I don't think
that's not empathy.
No, what I'm trying to say, that empathy comes when you have the understanding that I have the right to exist. Unfortunately, there were people in Hamas that they showed that clearly, that they didn't believe that any of the Jewish people in the state of Israel need to exist.
So there is no, the truth is there is no empathy between you and the Palestinian people.
I have empathy for the tragedy of the leadership, yes. I have empathy that they're under the tragedy of their leadership.
This is a very hopeless conversation then, isn't it?
No, it's not, because I think what's really hopeless is to build imaginary solutions. What's really hopeless is to think that a terror organization is something that will never hurt you. I think that the imaginary and the illusionary discourse that many people have need to be stopped. You cannot build peace on lies and illusions.
That's astonishing. They should fire this woman immediately because she is literally like the worst possible spokesperson ever. I mean, you want to talk about making people sympathetic to the Palestinian cause? All they have to do is listen to this woman talk for 20 seconds, and they're like, oh, Jesus Christ. This is a weaselly, dishonest prick right here. All right, then we get this. Joe Biden was asked about the Israelis targeting hospitals, and he says, quote, "It's my hope and expectation that there will be less intrusive action relative to the hospital. We're in contact with the Israelis. The hospital must be protected." So it was after this, after he said this, Israel raided the hospital. Like, he should really feel humiliated. He's being embarrassed here. Because even when he has little criticisms around the edges, Israel's like, yeah, cool. And then they just keep doing it and doubling down on the thing that they just got criticism for. So look, if he's not going to apply pressure, then, like, if he's not going to change things policy-wise, then all the is meaningless. If you're not going to cut off their weapons or cut off their money or allow some condemnation of them at the UN to go through, if you're not actually going to materially change U.S. policy and posture towards Israel, then all the means nothing. It means nothing. So, oh, man. It's so dishonest, too, because he says this, and then it's not like when they do it, he then comes out and says, okay, now you cross the line, now that's it. It's like he's just going to not say anything. It's beyond pathetic. All right, then we have this. Israel-Hamas near deal to release 70 women, children held hostage for 5-day truce. Okay, so look, I'm actually shocked that there are even detailed talks going on, because it looked like to me as an outsider that Israel was not interested in talking at all, because they were just continuing to ramp up the bombing, even putting their hostages in danger. So it looked to me like they're just not interested. Like, priority number one is just trying to eradicate Hamas, aka destroy Gaza and then take it. Seemed like that's the strategy. And so the fact that there were actually conversations going on, that's definitely a good sign. Definitely. So they say Israel and Hamas near a deal to release 70 Israeli women and kids held hostage by the terrorists in exchange for some Palestinian prisoners and a 5-day truce, officials said Tuesday. I believe it's going to happen, President Biden told reporters at the White House, adding when asked to give a message for the families of the hostages, hang in there, we're coming. An agreement could be announced within days once the final details are ironed out. A high-ranking Israeli official told Washington Post columnist David Ignatius, the general outline of the deal is understood, said the official who requested anonymity. While Israel has asked for the release of all 100 women and children currently held hostage, the number is likely going to be smaller, or about 70 women and children, according to a statement from a Hamas representative. Among the kidnapped are 9 American citizens and a legal permanent U.S. resident, but U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters at White House on Monday, I cannot look you in the eye and tell you how many of those hostages are still alive. Any deal faces complications, officials with knowledge of the situation told CNN. For example, it's not exactly clear who Hamas is holding as opposed to other militant groups in Gaza, such as Islamic Jihad. So Israel is still sorting out who Hamas might be able to release, the sources said. So, look, we've discussed this before, but there are about, depending on what numbers you believe, between 9,000 and 12,000 Palestinian political prisoners being held by Israel with no due process. So they're saying, give us some of our political prisoners and we'll give you some of the hostages in exchange for that and a ceasefire that lasts at least 5 days. This also flies in the face of what we've been hearing from all the idiots who are calling for a humanitarian pause and not a ceasefire. They're like, well, you can't have a ceasefire with Hamas. There's been ceasefires with Hamas in previous bombing campaigns in previous wars. You absolutely can. It's just an excuse to let them keep bombing as much as possible when people say, oh, it's not possible to do it. So look, this is a start. I would like everything to go further. I would like every single hostage held by Hamas to be released. I would like every single Palestinian political prisoner with no due process, Israel to release them, and of course, I'd like to get to the meat of the conversation, which is the root of the problem, which is working out some sort of a deal, whether it be a one-state solution or a two-state solution, to bring about Palestinian human rights and make it so that we get rid of the core of the problem here, which is leading to the tremendous hatred and controversy and fighting. But of course, we're further than that than we've ever been. So look, we'll end this on a somewhat positive note here. I hope a deal is reached. I hope it goes further than this. And I just hope the death and destruction ends, because Israel, to this point, has really showed no signs of being interested in slowing down even in the slightest. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.